again to one of my videos about me doing 3D stuff. This one is one of my most detailed projects yet, maybe one of my most ambitious too. I had to take a few breaks in between because it just was very strenuous to do, but nevertheless I had fun working on it, and I had to get creative on various details and solutions. As you can see, I started with the top, with the breast again, and at this point I had to start to tessellate a few extra lines so I could adjust the fabric with the body. Adding new lines usually helps with adjusting the object you are working on with the figure, and also visibility is a key factor, which means at this point I removed the arm to see what I'm actually doing here. The next part is just aligning the points, moving them by hand. Again, I used the symmetry to work on both sides simultaneously without having too much hassle, so it looks symmetrical on both sides and to just conserve time. I started to make the front twist. I had a few different ideas. I had started with tessellation, with moving points, with twisting the lines themselves, but this didn't quite work out. At this point I added just more points to see if this would help, but sadly to no avail. It got clear that I needed to remove parts of the tube to reconnect points, but I had no idea yet why. So I reloaded the project to a stage before, and then I began with an asymmetrical work, or with an asymmetrical idea, which proved to work. I connected the bot to the bottom, the bot to the top to the bottom, and vice versa. Smoothed it down, and I began to make the front clothes, or what I call front clothes. It's just a simple grid with multiple extensions downwards. About where I wanted it, I had to adjust it later. My first idea was to try and copy the breast clothes downwards to adjust it to the hip, but ultimately this proved just too time consuming, and a new tube, which I'm doing here, worked just this much faster. So again, aligning the points with where I want them. I had to redo it since I just forgot to use the symmetry tool at some point, I guess. Or not, I guess, I know. So again, symmetry tool, adjusting everything, aligning the points with the body, making it as tight as I wanted to, which needed quite some time. So at this point I was already pretty tired, pretty worn out for the first part of it, and decided I would just do the basic layout before I would take a break. Yeah, I had to check a few things in between. I had to check on my ideas, on my inspirations I had lying next to me. This is why I took some break at this point. As with the top cloth, the edges got extruded first inward and then downwards to make it look like it is wrapped, like it has the illusion, or like it has some depth. I adjusted the loincloth for the vertical fabric. So right here I'm just twisting and moving some points and make it look more like I wanted, or like it was in the inspiration. And then the upper fabric, the center fabric, is adjusted to the body. And finally the lower vertical fabric is added. At this point I was finished with the first part and took a break. In origin I took about 15 minutes for this. Then I touched up the vertical close, added folds and added depth, so again extruding the sides, smoothing it down, and now I use the tessellate tool to add a few lines and finally use them to move them to create wrinkles, as you will see in a second or two. At this point I was happy with how it worked out, so I smoothed it down, looked at it from a few angles, and then touched up the lower vertical fabric. I added the wrinkles first, moved it a bit, I think yeah, it's about 2 wrinkles I did, before I then got to the outer edges, moved them first backward, then inwards to make it look wrapped, smoothed it down, adjusted the lower edge to make it just look more normal, more natural, and then you see me, now I take a longer break, a longer pause. I had to check with my inspirations, with my sketches, for the first ornament. I had multiple approaches on this. At first I took a grid and I wanted to just cut and edit it in shape. This didn't work out, so I just took another stance, worked on a smaller grid, formed the first coin, and I used the thickening tool right there to make a 3-dimensional object out of the 2-dimensional grid. I noticed that additional lines were needed to give it more of the desired shape, especially lines on the outer faces. So I just tried to add them. This is also the end of the second part actually. I did the coin and then I just had to rethink how to do it. I redid the coin. This time I had another strategy which was a lot faster, which was a lot easier. Again, worked about extrusion. Then I discovered a problem, because I wanted to do multiple coins, but I wanted to make them into a single object, so I had to think about how do I make multiple coins into a single object. My first plan was to extend the sides of the coin, like you see right now, then just add 2 faces. This didn't work, so also it proved just too detailed to be repeatable. I looked into the tools and I found a merge tool, a weld tool, which combines multiple objects into one. Then I welded the points of the small extrusion together, so I copy and pasted the original part multiple times to get to the design I used in the end, this one right there. Then I just adjusted the size and put it on the place where I wanted, moved the single coins around, into their desired and final position. This took me also quite some time. It is sped up here by I think 8 times, so you can imagine how long I needed for it in original. When I had everything in place, I smoothed it down and then edited the single coins. I wanted some coins to have holes in the middle, which I did right there. Again, I'm using the bridging tool to connect the few pieces together. Then I thought, okay, this doesn't look detailed enough, I want something more, so I added gemstones as jewelry inside it. It's a simple tube, it's closed on one end. It isn't smoothed down, so it looks actually cut like a diamond or like a jewel, like a gem. The texture is just a flat plane before the object is then copied to another point. I also copied a single point to make a vertical decoration. I textured the coin before I copied it, so I don't have to use as much textures. I used a line drawing tool to draw a single line, then thickened it for so it is visible in the final render, used it as a string, and then copy pasted the whole object, the whole group, multiple times. The next ornament I was planning on working on was an ankh. So I copy pasted the sides and then I started to work on the ankh. I had multiple beginnings because I wasn't quite happy with how the shape turned out at first. So I just extruded a few times the top side of the ankh, welded the points, then thickened it and smoothed it, and pasted it onto the object, aligning it with the fabric. This was the end of the third part actually, and then I started with the last ornaments. I noticed at first that you could see the genital area from the side, so I added in an additional side wrap, if you want so, or side loincloth. It's the same procedure as before, simple wrapping, then adding wrinkles. I added the texture just right there, because I wanted to mirror it to the other side, and I wanted to skimp on textures, because it's just easier having both parts textured at once. And then I started with the final jewelry. At first I built the socket for the final ornament. It is the shape for the base on which the gemstone finally sits. Looks a bit like a tub or like a bowl or something. And then I copied part of the faces, tessellated additional lines on top of it, and just gave it some depth still. I adjusted and fitted the gemstone to the socket. The socket is actually not smoothed, and then just added standard texture packs to both. I decided to color them just right there, because the checkered base texture just sometimes gives me a headache if I work too much with it or if I have too many of them. I added some rings because I noticed it missed any kind of connector, and then I had the bad idea of trying to do the connection between the different gems first. It didn't work out at all, because I had to align it with the body, I had to align it with the gemstones I didn't even have there, so I abandoned it and just decided to first place all the ornaments on the clothing and worry about the connection later. It's a lot of copy paste, basically just copying the same object, then pasting it, moving it, aligning it, being happy with it. And then I got the new idea. I made everything invisible except for the things I was working on and drew another line, tessellated a few points in between and moved it down so it would look curved, or it would look like it would hang. There's the tessellation. There the points moved downwards. I made the body visible again so I could make sure it wouldn't clip through. Then I thickened it and I dissociated the point. Dissociation cut the object without making multiple objects out of it, so it moves the point back to where they are in the original unsmoothed part, or at the unsmoothed position. The first row is finished, so I began the second row. Same procedure again, copy pasting the socket gem groups, making the first round invisible, adding the connecting chain or the connecting string. In my head it's more like a chain. Again, tessellating in between, making the body visible, giving it some hang, some downward hang, dissociating the points. And then I began the third and last row. At this point I was really tired and decided, okay, 3 rows are enough. I initially wanted to do the last ornament much more close meshed, basically similar to a skirt, but this would have taken up even more time and forced me to redo all 3 rows, so I just said, okay, this is gonna work. I grouped the whole thing and then mirrored it over to the other leg, and then I began working on the backside of the skirt. It's copy pasting the gem and socket group, putting a few extra lines in between, and I finally am doing the last lines. I had to readjust the height of it because it was just too low, and then I began throwing textures at everything that was missing. So everything that I mirrored before had textures. I started in the order in which I created the pieces. I started with the breast fabric, then went with the center fabric, and finally with the hip clothes. I had a few minor hiccups there, but then I did the front cloth, and finally got to the connectors at the side, which I forgot before I copied it. Then did the single connectors on the back side, and then I finally decided to delete the mirrored part and paste the already fully textured one again. So this is the finished project, and I hope you enjoyed it. Goodbye!